Somewhere along the path of life, you begin to notice something odd. The people who talk the most often know the least. The ones who walk into a room needing attention rarely keep it. And the ones who truly see, truly understand, tend to sit back, quiet, watchful, calm. There's a reason for that, and tonight I want to share it with you. Not as advice, but as a quiet truth I believe you already sense deep down. Maybe you felt it before, in a meeting, at the dinner table, in a moment when chaos swirled and everyone rushed to speak. And then someone said nothing. They didn't panic, they didn't interrupt. They didn't try to prove they were right, and somehow they became the strongest presence in the room. Why? Because there's a rule not taught in schools, a principle not written on walls, but those who learn it, live it, stand out. Not loudly, but unmistakably. The rule is this: he who does not react leads. Not through dominance, but through mastery of himself. You don't outsmart people by out-talking them. You do it by out-centering them, by knowing who you are when others forget who they are, by choosing silence when others choose noise, by observing what others rush to judge. This is what the Stoics knew. Marcus Aurelius wrote not to impress, but to remind himself to stay within. Because the wisest man is not the one who always has an answer, but the one who knows when to wait. So before we dive into how to outsmart the world, not with tricks, but with truth, ask yourself quietly, when was the last time you chose not to respond? Not out of fear, but out of clarity, not to win, but to see more clearly. Because sometimes the smartest move is to stay still, and in that stillness, a new kind of power begins to rise, not over others, but over your own impulses. Let's begin there. Not with intellect, but with awareness. Not with a clever plan, but with a shift from reacting to reflecting. And once you learn this rule, not in your mind, but in your bones, you'll find you need fewer words, and yet you understand more than most. Part 1. The Emperor Among Noise. And so we begin, on a path that winds through history and hushes the noise of the present. If stillness is a form of strength, then it is only right we look to a man who ruled not just an empire, but his own mind. He sat on a throne, but knelt before truth. Marcus Aurelius was not born into silence. He was born into Rome, a city of ambition, urgency, and theater. The Colosseum roared with violence. The Senate buzzed with schemes. Soldiers marched. Poets shouted. And in the chambers of power, flattery clung to the walls like perfume too thick to breathe. Yet in the center of it all sat a man who often said less than those around him. He listened more than he spoke, and he wrote quietly, privately, long after others had fallen asleep, not for an audience, not for legacy, but to remind himself of what mattered. Power had its price. He paid it with presence. Imagine the burden, leading one of the largest empires in the world, while war pressed from the frontiers, plague spread through the cities, and betrayal whispered within the palace halls. Marcus could have drowned in indulgence. He could have numbed himself with pleasure or distraction, but he chose the harder path. He chose restraint. Each morning, before the sun warmed the marble columns, he returned to a single page, a meditation, a moment of clarity carved in ink. A message, not to the world, but to the man he hoped to be. He wrote things like, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." In a world that urged him to dominate, he disciplined himself to reflect. He ruled through silence, not spectacle. Those around him raised their voices to be heard. But Marcus, he let his actions speak. He chose to act without need for applause. He led not through force, but through consistency, of thought, of values, of quiet courage. He understood something few ever learn. Noise impresses, stillness influences. And that is why the people closest to him respected him, because he didn't need to perform. He needed only to remain aligned with his deepest convictions. The noise tested him, but he did not echo it. Even in personal loss, when death touched his children, when illness ravaged his body, when betrayal pierced his trust, he did not waver into blame or bitterness. He wrote, he observed, he reminded himself that nature gives and takes, that emotions rise and fall, that the mind can be trained to hold steady, like a lantern in the storm. He knew that the world would always clamor for reaction. But reaction is not mastery. Response is measured, thoughtful, chosen. So what can we learn from this emperor among noise? That wisdom does not require a crown. That strength is not in domination, but in inner discipline. And that in a world constantly shouting for your attention, the rarest power is this: to choose what you listen to and what you let go. In many ways, Marcus was not an emperor who rose above men. He was one who knelt beside his thoughts each day and rose above himself. And that is the essence of greatness, not to rule others, but to rule the impulses within, to become the quietest force in a noisy world. Because that quiet is what makes others lean in. As we continue, hold this image close. The marble palace. The scroll on the desk, the candlelight flickering beside words that still breathe today. A man with more power than anyone alive. And yet, his greatest triumph was learning how to stay still. Part 2. When life tries to manipulate you. But of course, stillness is not given freely. The world doesn't reward calm. It challenges it. And for a man like Marcus Aurelius, the true test wasn't in holding power. It was in keeping his soul intact when everything around him tried to pull it apart. Manipulation doesn't always wear a villain's face. Sometimes it comes disguised as praise, a well-placed compliment, a calculated smile. A voice that says, "You deserve this," when deep down, it knows you shouldn't take it. In the court of Rome, Marcus was surrounded by temptation, not just of flesh or luxury, but of ego. The manipulation came in subtleties, senators wanting favor, generals hiding ambition behind loyalty, and flatterers, always the flatterers, whispering that he was wiser, more just, more divine than any man who had ever ruled. But Marcus knew something dangerous hides inside constant approval. It softens the mind. It confuses your compass, and worst of all, it makes you forget that truth is often quiet, not popular. So he trained himself to see through the performance. He wrote again and again in his own hand, reminders like, "Be indifferent to what makes no difference." Ambition means tying your well-being to what others say or do. Sanity means tying it to your own actions. And isn't that the lesson we all face? Life, too, tries to manipulate us, not just through people, but through moments, through that promotion that comes with a cost, through the comment that's meant to provoke, through the pressure to react when silence would be wiser. The manipulation doesn't seek to destroy you. It seeks to steer you, and often the first thing it tries to control is your attention, because if it can claim your focus, it can bend your emotions. And if it has your emotions, it owns your decisions. Marcus didn't let that happen. When false friends praised him, he didn't rise. When critics mocked him, he didn't fall. He remained centered, not cold. but conscious. And you, yes, you have this same ability to pause when provoked. To ask, is this mine to carry, or is this someone else's attempt to move me? Because here's what the Stoics knew. You cannot be manipulated if you do not give away your steering wheel. Not every opinion needs a counter-argument. Not every invitation into drama deserves your presence. You are allowed to observe without responding. You are allowed to walk away without explaining. You are allowed to protect your clarity because no one else will do it for you. Even in pain, Marcus didn't collapse into reaction. When he lost people he loved, when Rome trembled with disease, when allies betrayed him, he wrote quietly, not to suppress the pain, but to keep it from owning him, to name it, to understand it, and to ask, with the calm curiosity of a Stoic, what is this moment trying to teach me? He once wrote, if you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your judgment about it. And it is in your power to wipe out that judgment now. What wisdom! What tenderness hidden beneath that iron self-command. He wasn't avoiding the world. He was refusing to be manipulated by it. So when life tries to pull your strings, pause. Feel your feet on the ground. Remember, just because someone calls your name doesn't mean you must answer. Just because life offers you a stage doesn't mean you must perform. The Stoic walks not with arrogance, but with quiet confidence. Not because they don't feel, but because they've learned feeling is not the same as following. You will be tested by charm, by chaos, by your own fears, but you are not helpless. You are not here to be twisted by passing winds. You are here to rise, to root yourself, to reclaim the one thing no one has the right to touch, your inner world. Hold it like a flame, and no matter what the world tries to do, you'll remain the one thing it cannot move, still, strong, and free. Part 3. The Inner Citadel. And so when the world failed to seduce him, when Marcus did not react, did not bend, he turned deeper inward. Not to escape, but to anchor, because there must be a place within you that no one else can enter, a chamber untouched by gossip, a garden unspoiled by envy, a fire that warms but does not burn. Marcus called this space the Inner Citadel, the fortified core of the soul. It was not built of stone, but of values, not guarded by soldiers, but by daily self-discipline. And like any fortress, it was not built in a day. He crafted it slowly, brick by brick, every meditation, every choice to forgive rather than resent, every quiet refusal to chase status, to cling to praise, or to retaliate against insult. These were the stones. Your mind is a kingdom. Who rules it, really? Is it your fears, your impulses, or is it you? Because a Stoic understands, if your peace can be taken by someone's words, then it was never peace. It was permission. But within this citadel, Marcus learned to say no. Not with anger, but with understanding. No to the desire to be liked by everyone. No to the craving to control what cannot be controlled. No to the small temptations that try to make you forget your larger purpose. The walls protect what matters, but only if you tend them. And that is the work of life, isn't it? Not just surviving the storms, but returning each night to sweep the hallways of the mind, to clear the dust of regret, to light a candle in the dark corners of thought, to ask ourselves gently, what have I allowed inside today that does not belong? You may not be a Roman emperor, but you are still the keeper of something sacred, your focus, your energy, your direction, and those are no small things. So how do you build your own inner citadel? You start small, you honor your boundaries, you speak less, listen more. You journal without the need to impress. You remind yourself daily of who you are, especially when the world forgets. Marcus did not wait until the crisis came. He prepared his spirit before the test, and when the test came, as it always does, he was not shaken, because when you've done the inner work, you are no longer begging the world to give you peace. You are bringing it with you. The Citadel is not just protection, it's identity. It is the place where your thoughts are your own, where your intentions are clean, where your self-worth is not on trial. And the more you return to it, the more you remember that nothing outside you is truly permanent, but what is built within can outlast empires. This is why Marcus Aurelius is remembered, not because of how loudly he ruled, but because of how quietly he prepared. So, begin today. Even if all you have is one moment, one breath, one act of clarity, that is enough to lay the first stone, and in time you'll feel it. A stillness no storm can shake, a strength that doesn't need to shout, a home within that cannot be stolen. Part 4. Why the wise stay quiet. And once you've begun building your inner citadel, something curious happens. You speak less, not because you have nothing to say, but because you no longer feel the need to say it. There is power in holding your tongue, not out of fear, but out of fullness, not because you are hiding, but because you are whole. Marcus Aurelius knew this well. He walked the marble halls of Rome not as a man desperate to be understood, but as one content to understand. And so he became a quiet presence, deep, grounded, unmoved. When others raised their voices, he lowered his. When others rushed to respond, he paused. When others argued, he listened. He once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." How rare that is, to not let the actions of others dictate who we become. In a loud world, silence becomes a form of rebellion. It says, "I am not ruled by this moment. I am not here to impress you. I am not trading my clarity for your approval." The Stoics believed that noise often disguises weakness. The person who must announce every move, every plan, every success is often the one who doubts himself the most. But the wise man, he knows that if something is sacred, it must first be protected. He doesn't expose his thoughts before they are ready. He doesn't parade his dreams in front of those who might mock them. He guards his vision until it is strong enough to stand. What you keep quiet becomes your source of power, because when you no longer need to explain, you are free to act. When you stop performing, you begin transforming. There is an old saying, "A seed grows in silence. A tree falls with noise. Creation is quiet. Destruction is loud. So be slow to speak." Not because silence is always right, but because it gives you space to choose the right thing to say. When you feel the urge to prove, pause. When you feel the pressure to react, wait. When you feel the need to declare your plans, ask yourself why. Sometimes we speak not to connect, but to be reassured. But what if you no longer needed reassurance? What if you trusted your path so deeply? You didn't need the world to clap before you took your next step. That is where true confidence lives, not in volume, but in alignment. Marcus Aurelius didn't need to be the loudest voice in the empire because he was the clearest one in his own soul. And that's what made him wise. Not just what he knew, but what he knew not to say. So ask yourself this: what might grow stronger if you kept it sacred? What plan needs silence instead of sharing? What pain needs reflection instead of reaction? What dream could blossom if you stopped shouting it into a world that hasn't earned the right to hear it? This is not secrecy. It is self-respect. It is the choice to grow roots before reaching toward the sun. And when you live like that, quietly, deeply, fully, you may just find yourself wiser than most, not because you have all the answers, but because you stopped giving your energy to every question. Part 5. The Rule of Self-Mastery. By now, the shape of the journey is becoming clear. From stillness to awareness. From silence to strength. And now, we arrive at the beating heart of Stoic philosophy, self-mastery. The world is full of people trying to master others. But Marcus Aurelius believed that the highest achievement was not in ruling an empire. It was in ruling yourself, your habits, your impulses, your thoughts, your expectations, not by force, but by friendship, not by suppression, but by understanding. He once reminded himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." It sounds simple, but it is a lifetime's work. Because self-mastery is not about perfection, it's about presence. It's about noticing when anger rises and letting it pass. It's about pausing when your pride wants to speak. It's about choosing the higher response, even when no one is watching. This is the hidden discipline the world doesn't reward, at least not right away. It won't get you applause, it won't make headlines, but it will make you unshakable. Marcus practiced this every day. When he was tired, he reminded himself to rise. When he was insulted, he chose not to retaliate. When he was afraid, he leaned into what he could still control. In his journal, we see not the words of a man preaching to others, but a man reminding himself again and again to be who he wanted to be. That's the work, isn't it? To hold yourself with enough honesty to say, "I didn't do well today, but I will try again tomorrow," and then actually trying. Self-mastery begins where excuses end. It begins the moment you stop blaming the outside world for your inside storms. It begins when you stop waiting for motivation and start moving through discipline. It begins when you stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What now?" This is the rule that makes you wiser than most. Because while others chase control over outcomes, you learn to master the one thing no one can ever take from you, your response. And when that becomes your compass, you stop chasing validation. You stop reacting to provocation. You stop swinging wildly at shadows. You move instead with intention. You rise with clarity. You speak only when your words carry peace. It is not the easy path, but it is the enduring one. Because self-mastery doesn't just make you calm, it makes you trustworthy. It makes you consistent. And in a world addicted to spectacle, consistency is rare. So build your rituals, strengthen your boundaries. Forgive yourself quickly, but don't let yourself off the hook. And above all, remember this: mastering yourself does not mean controlling every thought or emotion. It means being kind enough to witness them and strong enough to choose what to do next. That is what Marcus did. That is what you can do too, quietly, patiently, with strength that no one can see until the moment you need it most. Part 6. How to outsmart without words. Once you begin to master yourself, something shifts. You no longer need to outtalk the world, because now you outlast it. You don't outsmart people by being louder. You outsmart them by being stiller, not passive, but grounded. Not cold, but centered. Marcus Aurelius understood this. He didn't win arguments, he dissolved them. He didn't threaten, he remained unmoved. He didn't react to the games around him. He simply didn't play, and that was his power. Silence, when used with wisdom, becomes strategy. It gives nothing away. It reveals nothing that doesn't serve your purpose. It keeps your thoughts behind locked doors where no flattery can distort them and no insult can disturb them. To live like this is to become unreadable. Not because you are hiding, but because you are choosing what stays sacred. So how do you outsmart without saying a word? First, you listen more than you speak. You observe what people say, and more importantly, why they say it. You read the tension behind their tone, the fear beneath their criticism, the insecurity beneath their arrogance. And because you see more, you need to say less. Second, you don't interrupt the foolish. You let them finish. There is no need to prove anything to someone already proving who they are. Let their behavior speak. Let their need to dominate expose their lack of self-control. Marcus practiced this often. When others shouted, he simply wrote. When others schemed, he reflected. He trusted time to do what words couldn't. Third, you act more than you announce. No need to parade your goals. No need to warn people of what you'll do. You simply do it, and let the results speak, quietly, confidently, undeniably. There's an old truth the Stoics lived by. Don't tell people your plans. Show them your results. It's not secrecy, it's strength. Because the more you share prematurely, the more you invite opinions, interference, and energy that can dilute your intention. But when you move in silence, your path becomes clear. You are no longer distracted by the applause or the criticism. Finally, you let go of the need to be understood. This may be the hardest part, but the wise know not everyone deserves access to your truth. And trying to explain your depth to someone committed to misunderstanding you is a waste of your light. Let them misjudge you. Let them underestimate you. It is better to be silently powerful than loudly insecure. Marcus Aurelius was not considered a brilliant speaker. He was not charismatic in the way crowds love. But his mind, his discipline, his calm, his insight made him a force that endured long after the noise around him faded. So when life tempts you to argue, pause. When you feel the itch to explain, breathe. When someone challenges your silence, smile. Because outsmarting doesn't mean deceiving, it means discerning. And wisdom, unlike noise, does not rush. Remember this, still water runs deep. And you, when you are still, when you are intentional, when you are calm, you become impossible to manipulate, impossible to predict, and ultimately, impossible to defeat. Part 7. They won't see you coming. When you walk in silence long enough, something begins to happen. The world stops looking for you, and that becomes your greatest advantage, because the one they ignore is often the one they underestimate. And the one they underestimate is the one who holds the sharpest clarity. Marcus Aurelius never sought to be feared. He never played the role of the conquering emperor who stormed in with fanfare. He preferred to slip through the corridors of power unnoticed, until the moment his presence was felt in decisions that could not be undone. That was his art, moving with patience and striking with purpose. Let others crave attention. You crave understanding. Let others perform. You prepare. Let others speak on impulse. You speak when the words can't be ignored, and when the time comes, you will act. With precision, with calm, with the quiet momentum of someone who no longer needs to be seen to make an impact. This is the paradox of wisdom. The more invisible you become to the world, the more unstoppable you become within it. Because by the time the world turns to look, by the time they wonder where you've been, how you've grown, what you've built, you'll already be there, not waiting, not asking, just doing. The silent move is often the most powerful one. Because while others seek applause, you're seeking mastery. While they burn themselves out in the theater of approval, you are sharpening your soul behind the curtain. This doesn't mean you must be cold or distant. It simply means you no longer need to be visible to feel valuable. Let your work introduce you. Let your consistency build trust. Let your integrity speak in rooms you've never entered, and when they ask, "Where did you come from?" smile, because you've been building in quiet mornings, in unseen evenings, in those silent decisions no one applauded, but you made them anyway. You've been preparing, and now you move. They won't see you coming. And that's the point, because this world is trained to see noise as power, but you've become fluent in something deeper, something older than approval, something stronger than reaction, presence, discipline, purpose, and those who walk with purpose. They don't chase, they don't explain, they don't shout. They arrive, so keep building, keep rising. Keep choosing the path few notice until they must, and when they finally look for you, they'll realize you didn't need to shout to be powerful. You only needed to be ready. So if something within you stirred while listening, if you felt a quiet yes rising somewhere between the pauses, then maybe you're already on the path. The Stoics never promised ease. They promised clarity. They promised freedom, not from pain, but from being controlled by it. And that is a gift worth pursuing. If you're seeking a space that helps you breathe deeper, think clearer, and walk this life with a calmer mind, then this is your place. Subscribe to the Stoic Philosophy channel to continue walking this ancient but timeless path with us. Here, we don't chase noise, we seek truth. We don't offer hype, we offer harmony. There are many more videos waiting for you, stories, lessons, and reflections that will help you return to what matters: peace, purpose, and inner strength. So take your next step, watch another video, subscribe. And let this be your quiet rebellion in a world that never stops shouting, "You're not alone, you're not too late." And the journey has only just begun. He who has peace within does not need to prove anything outside. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay calm, stay present, and walk with purpose.